Imagine a future where Canada turns into a trade superpower. This is a very probable future of Canada that could happen as soon as the year 2045. And that's likely one of the reasons why the US wants a piece of Canada so much.
From tariffs aiming to corner Canada to Trump's bold claims that Canada should become the 51st state.
No, because they should be the 51st state, really. It would make a great state.
It could be the greatest merger of all time, or a geopolitical disaster.
These actions actually hint at a deeper US ambition to take on something that the US and Canada have had disputes about for decades. It started as early as 1970s in the Beaufort Sea. For one, both countries cannot agree about where the national borders in the Arctic should be. Canada says that the border should go straight up, starting from where the land border ends. The US says that the border should curve instead based on the shape of the land near the water. This has left this chunk of ocean without a clear owner for decades. And you're probably thinking, well, what's the big deal, right? It's just a small piece of frozen ocean. Well, this piece holds a tremendous economic significance, not just for both countries, but for the rest of the world. First, this area, about the size of New Jersey, that spans about 21 square kilometers, is believed to have a substantial oil and gas reserve. But that's not even the entire story.
The Beaufort Sea dispute is part of a much larger narrative, one that is rapidly becoming the next geopolitical battleground: control of the Arctic. The Arctic is heating up nearly 4 times faster than the whole planet, and now the scientists project the Arctic to be free from ice by 2040 to 2045. As the ice melts, this region in the northern waters of Canada is making the Northwestern Passage possible. It's a highly anticipated new shipping route that could redefine global trade forever. To understand why this passage is so important, let's look at why today's trade routes aren't good enough. The Suez Canal in Egypt and the Panama Canal in Central America. They are the two most crucial waterways connecting the East with the West today. Remember this picture that made headlines in 2021? This is a massive container ship, and this is how narrow the Suez Canal is. This single incident brought global trade to a grinding halt, since about 12% of global trade and 30% of world container shipments travel through here. The impact was enormous. Shipments of essential items like food, oil, and medical supplies were delayed. That disrupted supply chains worldwide for months. Some estimates suggest the incident cost global trade over $9 billion a day. That's how dependent the world is on this narrow waterway. And the ship was stuck there for almost a week. But the width of the canal is not the only shortcoming here. It's surrounded by conflict-prone zones, and piracy is rather common in this region, raising insurance costs and creating even more disruptions. Panama Canal is another option. The world was recently reminded of this option when Trump suddenly said that he wants the US to take it back.
The Panama Canal is vital to our country. It's being operated by China. China!
The Panama Canal is running low on water. A persistent drought, caused in part by the El Niño weather pattern, has left water levels dangerously depleted. Now the global supply chain is under threat as the holiday season.
Trade between the Americas and Asia often relies on the Panama Canal, but it's becoming risky. Climate change-induced droughts threaten the canal's operations, and more recent Chinese investments in the nearby infrastructure are making the US nervous, to say the least. Both of these canals, Panama and Suez, have major limitations: long distances, high toll costs, and the constant risk of disruption.
Now imagine a new route, safer, wider, and a route that could cut thousands of miles of these journeys. The Northwest Passage passes by the waters of Greenland, through archipelagos and islands of Canada, and waters near Alaska. The route offers a shortcut through the Arctic, directly connecting the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans. A ship traveling from Tokyo to London, for instance, could save over 5,000 kilometers, which is a full week of travel, by using either the Northwest Passage or the Northern Sea route instead of traveling through the Suez Canal. That's not only a third of the trip faster, it's also cheaper and more fuel efficient. It's so transformative that all the global powers want a piece of it. Not just the US and Canada, but also Russia and China. And that's one of the major reasons control over the Arctic is becoming a heated topic internationally. But for now, there are still challenges. The passage is still only accessible during the hottest summer months. The melting ice creates environmental risks with constantly shifting chunks of ice and strong currents. It is estimated that by 2050, as Arctic summers become longer and ice-free, the Northwestern Passage could become a reliable alternative for trade.
For Canada, this route represents a chance to become a central player in global trade. For the US and other nations, it's a strategic prize they can't ignore. The Arctic is estimated to contain 90 billion barrels of oil and 30% of the world's undiscovered natural gas, and significant deposits of gold, nickel, diamonds, and rare earth minerals. Canada prohibits offshore oil drilling in marine protected areas, and Greenland banned oil exploration back in 2021. And the US suspended oil and gas leases in Alaska's Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. But Russia never really cared about wild nature and protected areas. Together with China, they have been making moves in the Arctic, making Americans and the rest of the Western world nervous.
We're concerned about Russia's claim over the international waters of the Northern Sea route, including its newly announced plans to connect it with China's maritime Silk Road.
Russia hopes to extract 6 billion tons of oil and 2 trillion cubic meters of gas in its Vostok oil project, provided the Arctic melts enough so it can export oil and gas. This project requires new airports, marine terminals, railways, electrical grids, internet cables, and hundreds of kilometers of pipelines. Since Russia's invasion in Ukraine, the Vostok project lost many investors, and this is where China stepped in with its money to pour into infrastructure to secure its influence in the Arctic and launch the Polar Silk Road initiative. But there is more. Apart from oil and gas exploration, the Arctic offers a direct route between North America and Eurasia, making it a critical area for military operations. In the last decade, Russia has reopened over 50 military bases, tested hypersonic missiles, and increased nuclear-capable bomber patrols in the Arctic. Together, the Russians and the Chinese conduct joint military drills near Alaska, which is stressing out not just the US, but the rest of the world interested in the Arctic. And since Finland and Sweden are both joining NATO, now every country other than Russia will be the member of the military alliance. This puts peaceful cooperation in the Arctic under a serious threat.
And this is where the American interest in Canada's Arctic deepens even more. And Canada doesn't necessarily mind partnering with the US more closely. See, Canadian armed forces are no match to the Russia-Chinese alliance, so it needs the help of the big and powerful American neighbor to defend and protect the Arctic borders. And Americans know it. This led to some significant recent moves towards Arctic in Ottawa, literally and figuratively. Canada has recently announced a $72 billion North American Arctic policy, and the stakes could not be higher. The new policy will strengthen the Canadian Armed Forces' presence in the region to assert sovereignty, since Canada claims that the maritime boundaries of the Northwestern Passage are Canada's internal waters. Canada will also build new icebreakers, patrol ships, drones, and fighter jets to secure the region. Much of the security funding is going towards modernizing NORAD, the joint US-Canada defense organization tasked with protecting the North American airspace. See, historically, Canada has lagged behind on all matters in the Arctic. Many of its northern bases are decades old and are poorly equipped to handle the Arctic's harsh conditions. This historical underinvestment has left Canada vulnerable, not just to foreign threats, but to the challenges of defending its own sovereignty claims. Canada's poor security in the Arctic has made it an easy target. So here's an interesting insight that we actually ran into when doing our research for the video, where we ranked every single province in Canada. This is the total investment in infrastructure in Canada. Ever since 2020, Canada has doubled its infrastructure investments in its near Arctic regions, Northwestern Territories, Yukon, and Nunavut to a lesser extent. Its infrastructure investment per capita numbers are the highest in Canada, partially due to the low population, but also thanks to the increased development. These are small, yet mighty steps for Canada to assert its borders.
However, Canada faces even more challenges in asserting its borders from people living in the north. For indigenous communities like the Inuit, the Arctic is more than just a geopolitical prize. It's their home. Through centuries of evolution, northern indigenous communities learned to rely heavily on their environment to survive. Melting ice threatens their traditional hunting grounds, as well as wildlife habitats and entire ecosystem. An increase in shipping traffic means more pollution, risk of oil spills, and noise interference. All this endangers a way of life that has endured for centuries. The indigenous people don't want that, and if they do decide they want it, they will want a piece of it too. Canada has pledged to prioritize indigenous voices in its Arctic policies, but it's not easy to balance economic development with environmental and cultural preservation. And that is one thing that is guaranteed to frustrate the USA. After all, Americans are not particularly known for their patience when economic opportunities are on the line. The US often prioritizes rapid development and strategic gains, which clashes with Canada's more deliberate approach to integrating indigenous perspectives and environmental safeguards. This difference in priorities is creating tensions, especially in such a high-stakes race for Arctic resources and influence in the region. And it's not like Canada, Russia, China, and the US are the only interested parties. Nordic countries like Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Iceland all have a geopolitical and security interests in this too. And China invited itself to the party as a major investor in infrastructure. However, the stakes are the highest for Canada, the United States, and Denmark, as Greenland's governing nation. These countries have direct territorial stakes in the Arctic. Canada hosts the Northwest Passage, and Denmark and the United States are positioned near key Arctic trade and resource zones. So what does the future hold?
One thing is certain. We will start hearing a lot more about the Arctic in the near future. Canada's Arctic regions are set to experience a surge in infrastructure investments, creating new job opportunities and transforming remote communities into strategic hubs. Everybody will want a piece of it. Another thing is clear: the US is unlikely to sit and do nothing. As Canada's Arctic potential skyrockets, the US may adopt a more aggressive stance, driven by its need to secure influence over the Northwest Passage and Arctic resources. For Canada, this means a tough road ahead, one where we will have to muster all our political power, gain support of our locals, build alliances, and build influence to safeguard our sovereignty and interests. But the question still stands: what will the US do? Will the US support Canada's claim to the Northwest Passage, or will it push for international control? Or will it choke Canada with tariffs and other things to set the ground for hostile takeover and annexation? And who knows what other leverage US is hiding up their sleeve? The next few years will be key as we look at Canada and the US and see how they might potentially collaborate on the most important climate and economical transformation of the century. What's even more curious is how they, together, are going to navigate the potential conflicts with Russia and China. And all geopolitical games aside, what is going to happen to the locals and the wildlife, who will suffer the most from this disruption? Canada and the US must decide whether to stand together or risk losing the Arctic to rival powers. What do you think? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. Hey guys, thank you for watching this video till the end. Our goal with this channel is to share insights that will help everyone excel and thrive in Canada. Aside from educational content, we're interested in a wide range of topics. We always strive to understand how the world works and where the next opportunities are going to be. We found that this Arctic story is fascinating and wanted to share it with you, so we would love to hear your thoughts on it and whether you enjoyed this format of the video. Let us know if you like this type of content and whether there's something else that you want to see more of. If you want to support this channel, the best way to do it is to join us as a member, or you can check out our merch shop down below for some comfy Canada-themed merch. Again, thank you so much for watching, stay curious, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.